when we think about friendship, one of the things that, I hope that we might think about is that friends share interests, personal stories, humor, and enjoy spending time together. But making and keeping friends doesn't always come naturally for people with ADHD. Challenges like social anxiety or rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which are very common among adults with ADHD. In fact, research shows that a third of adults with ADHD struggle or have a diagnosis of social anxiety. These things can really make it difficult to form and maintain friendships. So before I talk about some obstacles to relieve the stress around interpersonal relationships, I'd really like to hear from you. What is a friend? Marcella says holding space for each other in likes and differences as an opportunity to learn and grow. Cletus is from Ghana. Welcome. Rain says someone I can be myself with, trustworthy, enjoy spending time with, mutual interests. Lexi says compatibility, mutual support, love, fondness, and fun. So I'm going to take a minute because I realize that I don't have my little downloadable gift for you lined up. So I'm going to go get that this very second because I want to share it with you. Give me a minute. I have one on social anxiety. So I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to put it into our chat so you can get it for yourself. Okay? It's a free downloadable gift. So Tanya and Sean say, I'm not sure that I've ever really truly grasped what a friend should be, and that's probably why I've always ruined my friendships, and I'm here. Okay, well, I'm not sure you've ruined friendships because friendship is a two-way street, right? Got to remember that. Pat, finding a friend is finding the part of you that you didn't know was missing. Okay, and Lexi says, yes, trust, confidentiality, so important. So we want to think about some of the obstacles that get in our way around interpersonal relationships, particularly for people who live with ADHD. And practicing some communication skills over time means that you'll make progress step by step. So let's take a look at a couple strategies. So first of all, we're going to look at first some of the obstacles. So one of the obstacles that I see a lot for people with ADHD is fear. And I wonder if it's fear about something about yourself, a shame, or something that you're worried about sharing, or fear about someone else. So a few statements, I'm wondering if these sound familiar to you, and if so, put it up in the chat. I will embarrass myself. I will make a bad impression. People won't like me right away. I have to be perfect to be liked. I'm not smart enough or pretty enough. You fill in the blank enough. So I'm not enough. So I think that's one of the first obstacles that I see. And that people, you might want to socialize and get to know people, but perhaps previous incidents of rejection or trauma might disable you from doing it. And it might be hard to kind of fight your brain to overcome it. These types of core fears and these statements that I said, which I'm going to say again, and hopefully you'll let me know. I will embarrass myself. I will make a bad first impression. People won't like me right away, so why bother trying? I have to be perfect to be liked. These core fears, so common for many people with ADHD and many people without it, can feel overpowering and debilitating. And so you may not actually have something to fear, but your brain is holding on to these negative statements, and it can kind of overwhelm the positive parts of your brain that say, oh, you're creative, oh, you're funny, of course you have something to offer relationships. So some of this worry is natural and expected, but if left unchecked, it can really lead to social anxiety. So let's see what's happening here in the chat. People pleasing to avoid conflict. Yes, Marcella, thank you for sharing that. That's true for a lot of people with ADHD, particularly women. Susie, struggling with boundaries. Yes. Where is the line about sharing? I share this, or do I share that? Am I oversharing? Am I missing a cue that this person is now bored with me? Alex, finding it hard to talk about something. So it's actually hard to formulate the words that you want to say in a conversation. And by the time you get those words together, the conversation has moved on to a different topic or a different place. Lorraine asks, do I think ADHD can be a catalyst of agoraphobia? I think ADHD can travel with agoraphobia for sure. So are there any other things, any other core deficiencies that you think you carry around that you might be getting in the way of you actually reaching out to people and trying to connect with them? Maybe I'm going to say the wrong thing initially, that fear of embarrassment. I think another obstacle is actually missing cues. So because people with ADHD, struggle with distraction or distractibility, focus, concentration, there's plenty of people who also can sometimes just miss visual cues, verbal, like they may not hear something, or they may not see how a person's responding, or they may be kind of wrapped up in sharing their own information. You're super excited about that, and so you're not actually witnessing what's happening around you. You're not meeting someone where they are. And if you're not meeting them where they are, they're certainly not going to be able to meet you where you are. So some of the things that I say is, Lorraine, too chatty. Carolina, welcome, nice to see you. What about trying to help my son expand his interests and find commonalities? Yes, and I'm going to talk about that. One of the ways that we make friends has to do with having shared interests and activities, because you're spending time with people on a mutual goal or a mutual fun thing, and therefore you start to build that kind of familiarity and comfort with people. Bob, to me, a friend is very hard to find. One that listens when you're talking, who will want to spend time with you, and one who doesn't die on you. Marnie. Oh, this is Marnie. I'm so glad you wrote this. I am too much. If it's okay, I'd like to share a story about my life. So I am a big personality. You probably can tell. I'm intense. I have, I like, deep conversations that are engaging and activities that are rewarding. And I'm also, I like to think about things and talk about them and, dive in. And when I was in my my master's program for psychology, I was doing an internship at a place, and it was we had a small group supervision, and it was myself and two other women. And I walked into supervision one day, and the supervisor and the women who were sitting there said, "Oh, we have something we want to talk to you about." And like how I get that feeling when something drops in the pit of your stomach. That was the feeling I had. And essentially what they said is just like, you're too much. You're too intense. You want to really talk about and kind of go into things too deeply. And, you're just a lot, and we need you to be less. And I was kind of shocked. I mean, I had been already to college, and believe me, I was not too much at the college I went to. There were plenty of people who were just like me, really, bright and curious and engaged. And it was hurtful. I felt ganged up on. And I remember leaving the office, and I walked into the director's office, and I closed the door because he knew what was going on, and I started to cry. And I said, "Oh, I'm too much. I think I'm too much. They don't like me." And he looked right at me, and he said, "Sharon, I understand how you feel, but here's the thing. If you were a man, no one would have said anything to you. You're just fine. I wouldn't worry about it." And I was so touched in that moment to be held by this psychologist who I respected. You know, this was an internship and people were at all different levels. There were master's level clinicians, doctoral level clinicians. In my group, I was a doctoral level clinician. I was the only doctoral level clinician, so maybe there was a sense that people might have felt threatened by that. But here he was. I so looked up to him, and he was validating me. And so for those of you out there who feel like you're too much, I want to say, you know what? There's a place for you with other people who are just as much as you are. And to be honest, I actually have never heard that again. And so it's clear to me now, many, many years later, that this was more about them than about me. Nonetheless, it feels bad to be on the receiving end of that. And so when people come to me and they say, people think I'm too much or I'm afraid I'm too much, I want to really kind of, reframe that into saying, you're just enough. Maybe sometimes it's like Dr. Hallowell says, you have bicycle brakes on your Corvette engine. So let's try to work on, strengthening those brakes. Or let's try to figure out when you can be this much and when you might need to rein it in a little bit. So I hope it's okay that I shared that story, because I think sometimes we walk alone in the feeling of being too much. And, I think I've shared here also that, in my family growing up, I was very sensitive. And I was also kind of like, oh, you're so sensitive. What's wrong with you? These kinds of dismissing, minimizing comments hurt us. And they stay with us, and they become a part of us that talks to us in very cruel and unnecessary ways. So I'm going to hopefully today help you learn how to really, talk back to that part of those parts of yourself and really value who you are for who you are. Okay, Marcella, expectations not being met, my own or theirs. Susie, auditory processing delay, right? So it's hard to catch everything that people are saying to you. Arlene, missing social cues. Tanya, what about narcissism, focusing primarily on your needs and not really being there for the other person, or possibly not being able to listen to them or follow their needs? Is that narcissism? It could be. It could also be a kind of self-involvement that comes from living with ADHD when you don't feel like people really understand you, and you're out to kind of, advocate for yourself as much as possible. Tricky with a group, e.g. WhatsApp groups are grim. I'm sorry, I just realized I don't have my light on. Excuse me. WhatsApp groups can be grim, right? Groups are tricky. Not always true. You are warm, caring, and curious. That's so nice, Sharon. Let's see. You're welcome. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Marnie. Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I have to put up with behaviors and comments that I normally wouldn't, or let people talk to me kind of like I'm less than, and keep peace between me and my friends or relationships. Actually, any of all my relationships are like that. So I push a lot away, more than they think I do. Right. And so I want to talk about that, because actually what I want to say to you, Anisha, is no, you don't need to put up with behaviors to be friends with someone. What you might need to do is decide, is this something I want to focus on or not? Is this something that actually has value for me? What they're saying makes sense to me? When those people said that to me in my supervision group, I thought, well, I do come in and I'm like excited and a little chatty, and I could enter the room, more quietly and sort of let other people bring things up, and wait a bit. So there was some value for that in me. Quiet watching. So sometimes, with people, the question is not so much like putting up with behaviors that you normally wouldn't let people talk to you about, because those aren't your people then. Because if they're talking to you in ways that make you feel bad about yourself, that's not actually constructive feedback, and that's not really a friend. So let's talk a little bit about social anxiety. So social anxiety is a fear that people will scrutinize you in either familiar or unfamiliar situations, and that this negative judgment will have harmful effects on you. And these worries about humiliation and rejection are persistent and restrict your activities, interests, and relationships. Social anxiety directly interferes with making and keeping friends. It's a negative response to a trigger like a social conversation or a performance, carrying out a function in front of other people, ordering your salad and your latte at a cafe, or actually being observed in a way that is beyond the actual threat of a situation. So you feel like people are all watching you when actually, no one may be watching you. Or it might be realistic that you're feeling a little anxious because you're giving a presentation. So it can occur with overthinking before an actual the actual situation. During the situation, you might feel a certain distractedness and visible nervousness. And then after, you're going to beat yourself up and obsess about what you did or didn't do, what you said or you didn't say in a situation. And the worst part of social anxiety is that you know what you are doing doesn't make any sense, but you can't stop it. So I'm curious, for those of you who are here, how does social anxiety manifest for you in your life? What does it look like for you? Did you know that, as I said, the research shows that as much as 1/3 of adults with ADHD experience social anxiety? Now, here's the interesting thing about social anxiety. You can be an extrovert and still have social anxiety. Maybe in open spaces with people, you have a little anxiety. Or maybe you go to a party and there's one conversation where it doesn't go quite the way you would like it to, and then you focus on that. Or you're worried about what other people are talking about in a different conversation that you're not part of. So it is important to remember that you don't, having social anxiety doesn't mean that you're introverted, because there are extroverts who have it. One of the things the lies that social anxiety tells you is you're not good enough and you don't deserve to have friends. The other lie is that nobody really likes you. So these lies kind of get into your head and they sort of cycle around. It's kind of like the hamster on the wheel. And once they get going, it's hard to step back from them. Let's talk a little bit about, before I talk a little bit about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which also goes into making and keeping a friend. I'm curious about some of the things people have written here. Interrupting, because I'll forget. Right, so this is one thing that, thank you Lorraine, is a big issue for many people with ADHD. We interrupt too much. And we interrupt maybe because we think we'll forget, or also, we might be talking with someone who's kind of a long talker and we get bored. We're like, okay, already, I got it. Let's get to the point. You can't kind of hold in what you have to say any longer. And so we'll interrupt, and then, when we interrupt, that person feels diminished in some way, like, oh, you think what you have to say is more important than what I'm saying, so you're going to interrupt me for it, instead of understanding that you're interrupting because you literally can't contain yourself or your thoughts anymore. Alex says, I used to have social anxiety until I had my own children, which helped me come out of myself. Unfortunately, my eldest son really suffers and won't even go to a bar to ask for a drink. I used to be like that. So, one of the things that we want to think about with social anxiety is creating a challenge ladder with different rungs of different kinds of activities, and we're going to break down things to do into really small into small pieces. So one rung might be going to a cafe. You walk in, you stand there to the count of 10, you turn around, you walk out. Check. Then the next time you might go in and you might get in line to order something and actually get to the counter and order it. That would be a check. Then maybe another time you do all those things and you drink your beverage at the cafe rather than leaving after, as in the second instance. So, you have to have practice in what it's like to actually be social. These are prosocial practices, so that you can then do something that's a little scarier, which would be to go to a bar with a friend and ask for a drink, because you've already figured out, you have that practice, that strength, that muscle is already pretty conditioned to go into a place and ask for a beverage. Farah, I usually beat myself up after meeting people and having a fun evening. Oh, that makes me sad. I think what would be really helpful, instead of beating yourself up, is to come back from an evening and think about 3 things that we really enjoyed that evening, and if you must, 1 thing that you would like to have done better. 1, not 17. I want the balance to switch, right? We have to get more positives in your experience of yourself socially, because you're beating yourself up and probably no one is thinking about you in this way except for that negative voice in your head. Carolina, excuse me. I'll be in a room that doesn't feel friendly and I shut down. I become a spectator. I'm an extrovert. So one of the things that we want to do when we walk into a room where we may not know people and we feel a little insecure is to take a few minutes and kind of observe what's happening in the room, and then see if there's somebody who might look friendly or might have an outfit on that you really like, or maybe you're at a conference and there's an opening at a table and you sit down and you take the risk, you introduce yourself. So what happens is things don't feel friendly when we don't know someone in that room, and yet we can't make it feel friendly if we don't actually introduce ourselves and get to meet those people. It's this really frustrating catch-22. So I think that when you go into a room and you don't know anyone, sometimes if you stand there, someone may come to you. And otherwise, I would encourage you to look in the crowd and see, like, wow, I really like that woman with the tiger print pants. I'm going to walk over and say hello, or just introduce myself and say, hey, I have to say, I noticed your pants from across the room. They're really great. Something small that and something that actually makes them feel good, that would start a connection. And this is very scary for many people, and particularly people with social anxiety. Tanya, finding myself closing everyone out and not just engaging in social events by staying home. Right. And my guess is, Tanya, that you're feeling lonely and it's not fun to stay home without actually connecting with people. So, what I would encourage you to do is to start small. Basically meet one person for something, or go somewhere where there's just a few people at a get-together, so that you're not feeling like you're in a rough ocean here trying to stay afloat, but rather you're in a small pond, to build your level of comfort. And I would encourage you, if you have a close friend or family member who you trust, who knows this about you, to start by doing something with them. Jessica, yes, those lies get me. Alex, okay, you've gotten better in your 50s, I'm glad. Sensitivity. Monica, I never used to have it, but I have a friend of 35 plus years who beat me down about my personality. I am now quiet and not my normal self anymore. Okay, Monica, I'm going to say that myself and everyone else who's watching is going to say that this person is not a friend. This person is not your friend. Someone who beats you down, who makes you feel bad about yourself in the guise of trying to help you, is not a friend. Friends make you feel accepted, and you trust them and they trust you. There's a joy and a comfort level being with them. And I think one of the hardest things for many people with ADHD who struggle with making friends is being able to set a limit with someone who is not a friend, feeling like, well, if I don't have you, then I won't have anyone. Or for a lot of women, feeling like we deserve that. And that might be true if you're a man too, but in terms of how we women are socialized, we don't deserve something better than that. And Monica, you deserve better than that. Let's see. Oops, excuse me. This happened 1.5 years ago. I've never been the same. She was my solid rock all those years. I can't even imagine what that's like for you. But if you can for a minute, pretend like you've moved to a different place and you're starting over. Is there a religious organization you could join? Could you volunteer at at a shelter, somewhere where you could meet people who like what you like? I think that would help. But yeah, that's a big betrayal. Let's see, Anesha. I get my speech jumbled up and my brain goes faster than how I can talk, and I talk really fast, but I just can't keep it up, and it sounds like I don't know what I'm saying or I'm stuttering. Right. So what you have to do in those moments, Anesha, is really kind of slow yourself down. Breathe. Try to remember 1 or 2 words of the idea that you have that's important. Because the more that you get anxious, the worse the jumbling is going to be. Lorraine, during a conversation you switch subjects. Okay, I have to look at reminders. Destiny, I love people and want to be around people, but I feel like I constantly need approval. And I feel like I need to make everyone feel good, but being judged the whole time. That's a lot to carry, Destiny. We all have our own approval cups. I think of mine as like a really nice ceramic mug. And ideally we want to fill it up with water ourselves. Right? We want to approve of ourselves and drink that, and that's going to keep us solid and feeling good about ourselves. But a lot of times we hold our approval cup out to others. Particularly women, we're conditioned to do this, and we hold our approval cup out to others and we want them to fill it up. So can you put a little in here? I'm going to say and do what you like so that you'll do that. Or could you put a little in here? I'm going to praise your work in our meeting even though I think it was terrible, etc., etc. So we really want to adjust the approval rating that we're expecting or hoping for other people. Destiny, I've been at my house excuse me, for months, other than getting food at the grocery store. Only if I have to, I've ordered online. All right, so Destiny, I really want to encourage you to think about what is one small way you could step outside of your comfort zone. Who could you do that with? Is it a family member? Is it a colleague? Is it a friend? Because actually what happens is when we isolate ourselves and we continue to isolate ourselves, we do grow a fear of going outside of the house, that agoraphobia. So you want to start to work that muscle out a little bit by leaving the house. Lorraine, not a friend. With you on that. Marcella's so relatable. I'm sorry they hurt you, Monica. Not a friend, Destiny. Thank you. I've recently come to that conclusion. Oh yeah. Sophia, outside of ADHD, I had to discover that my first bully was a parent. Ow, ow. That kind of dysfunction needed a separate support group, which I just recently found in my 50s. I'm so glad that you've gotten a support group to help you. And that kind of bullying by a parent is often, we consider that to be a form of emotional abuse. So I'm really sorry that you experienced that, and I'm glad you're getting support. I do that too. Now I tell the person, I say I'm changing subjects. That's a great idea, to be able to say in a conversation, hey, do you mind if I change the subject for a minute? Or, there was something you said a few minutes ago that I'd like to go back to. So part of what happens with people when they struggle is they need those taglines. So some taglines that would help would be just those things that I said. Hey, do you mind if I change the subject for a minute? Or can we go back to something you said earlier? It was curious and it took me a while to kind of formulate my ideas around it. Alex, that's dreadful. I've come across extroverted people making fun of people who find it difficult talking in groups. It's terrible. Thank you. Let's see. Lots of comments here. My son is 19 and has trouble with his peers, so he communicates better with kids 4 or 5 years younger. They look up to him as a big brother, and that's a plus. How can I get him out there to meet new people? Well, he might actually have satisfying friendships. We want to remember that the ADHD brain matures more slowly, and so in some areas, your son actually is more like a 16-year-old, maybe a 15-year-old, than a 19-year-old. And so he's meeting with people where he can connect and feel safe and secure. He may not be ready to be friends with 19-year-olds, and that's okay. Let's give him a little time to get get all that myelination and connection happening. Heather, how to deal with feelings of insecurity in new situations where you try to impress and overshare, especially in membership exclusive situations. I think you're really hitting a nail on the head here, Heather, which is you're feeling nervous, you're insecure, you're in a new situation, and you're trying to impress people, so you overshare. When actually, what's more impressive is not oversharing. So we have to remember that in situations like this, when we're meeting people, sometimes less is more. If you're sure that you can basically say something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and isn't going to take longer than maybe 3 minutes, which is a pretty long time in a conversation, then I think it's important to try it. But maybe practice some things that you want to say and see how long they're going. One of the things that happens is after like a couple minutes, people tune out. And so you want to try to keep your comments within, a few minutes, particularly in new situations. Impressing people is part of that approval cup thing. And you're not going to impress people by oversharing, actually, because what's going to impress people is the authenticity of who you are, your warmth, your humor, your kindness, your attention. That's what matters to people, not your accomplishments or if you say the funniest thing in the room. Katie, I have a hard time in the workplace. I feel like I don't fit in or know how to act appropriately, so I'm not judged. So, this happens to a lot of people, Katie. We're not sure in a workplace, what's going on. And there are people who are stars at work, they're really successful and they seem to have it going on and they can talk to anyone and they always look good. And you may compare yourself to that person. So once you compare, you're in the compare and despair spiral. And then it's going to make it much harder for you to feel like, oh, you know what, I fit in just fine. So, the best thing that I would recommend, Katie, in the workplace is connecting with one person, 1 or 2 people. Maybe they're on your team, maybe your desk is near them, maybe they're sitting at the picnic table outside at lunch on a cool but sunny day, and you yourself go out there. Most people want to start a conversation or participate in a conversation if you ask them about yourselves, like, how's your day? Where do you live? How long have you been working here, etc., etc. People may judge you or not, but you can't control that. And that's the thing about social anxiety. You're in your head wondering about how other people see you. You're in your head thinking about what you should say or do next that will impress other people. You're in your head imagining how you're being perceived, judged, rejected, etc. Instead, we want you to be in the present. We want you to participate in what's going on and not spend time in your head, other than being aware of maybe how long you're talking or interrupting. Those kinds of things are useful. Being in your head, basically defining how other people are judging you is actually really unhelpful. Okay, so I want to spend a little time before we stop today talking about some things that you can do, some strategies for making and keeping friends. So, of course, there's that saying, be a friend to have a friend. So the way when you express caring towards someone and extend a hand in friendship and actually show them, who you are, where you're not trying to impress them or but you're actually showing up as yourself, is a way to meet someone and encourage hopefully them to show up. If someone is telling you things about yourself that are critical, mean, nasty, if you get a feeling when someone's talking that you're less than, that person is not going to be a friend. That person is not going to be a friend. So, yes, you may need to make the first move in situations. Introduce yourself and get the ball rolling. And this can certainly be uncomfortable at first. But with enough practice, you'll get the hang of it. The social skills are about practice. And if you're isolated at home all the time and you're not going out to practice them, then they're going to get weaker and weaker. So I'm going to encourage all of you who feel like you're housebound or you're not going anywhere to figure out how you can get out of the house one day a week, one time a day. Maybe you'll walk in the park. You might not say anything to people, but you might smile as you pass someone or say hello. Maybe you'll go out and get a coffee, so you have the experience of being in a room with other people. But if you don't practice, you can't get stronger. So I'm really going to encourage you to practice. Making friends depends on these 4 factors. Resilience. Resilience is key to making friends because you need to shift and be flexible. You need to be able to bounce back if something isn't going the way you'd like it to, or maybe you do say something that's inappropriate and you say, whoa, sorry, I overshared there. That was a bit much. I apologize. You can own stuff and catch it without being an apology machine. If you're going to own something about yourself and be accountable, be selective about what that is. Be willing to take a risk, and it might not work out, and that's okay because like that bouncing ball, you will rise again. Proximity fosters relationships. So doing things with people, sharing activities, it provides easier access to people, and it makes it, it's more comfortable. It's just kind of more casual to spend time with others. Seeing people repeatedly through a range of settings helps build trust and enjoyment of each other's company. And then you can kind of collect information about their behavior, their likes, their dislikes, their lies, little conversations, so you can circle back and say, hey, I remember last week you said your dog, had a little stomach bug. How's he doing today? And of course, having similar interests and being in the same spaces. Examples would be work, school, gym, hobbies, religious organizations, etc., etc. Of course, we want to remember that friendships come in different forms. It's like the onion. I know, in Shrek, there's the whole thing about the onion, but really, it's like circles, extending circles. So in the center are your intimates, your family, your partner, maybe 1 or 2 special long-term friends. Then outside of that are your best buds. People you hang out with, people you are your closest friends, a few people who fully accept you as you are and whom you accept as well. There's trust, honesty, loyalty, and deep caring in these relationships. Then after that, outside of that, are your pals, right? Pals are the next level. You spend time with them, you like each other, you share interests and activities, you may know things about each other, but you don't expect them to show up for you in the same way as best buddies, okay? So the difference between best buddies and pals is about the expectation. Acquaintances are folks you see around. You may know a bit. You say hi when you pass them. These are people you might see at work or at the gym or at the grocery store. You may even get a cup of coffee with them to get to know them better because they seem interesting, and you might want to move them into the pals department, right? Acquaintances can be potential pals. You're friendly and you know some things, but you don't really hang out that much. And then finally, there are strangers, people you don't know, but who knows, you might meet them one day. So these are people who may say hello to you as they pass you on the street or ask you about the weather while you're in line at the grocery store, and you can respond briefly or engage in chit-chat if you're comfortable with that. So let's look at what's been happening here in the chat, because there's lots of comments. Pamela, what about if it's your child who has been chronically ill for 20 years since the young age of 20? MS. I don't feel like it gives her the right to be mean. We've had 2 addicts in our family, addicts, I think you meant ADDICTS, and I get that our life is hard, but I've always been there for her. I've raised 2 of my grandchildren. No, I don't think that people get to be mean because they're unhappy or they're frustrated or they have particular illness. It sounds like you've really been an incredible caring mother, grandmother, social worker, and if she doesn't want to have a relationship with you, in some way you have to grieve it and let it be what it is. Let it be where she wants it to be and accept that, because otherwise you're living in frustration and anger. Marcella, friendship of 25 plus years, said the same thing. If I'm too much, go find less. Ended the friendship, the freedom and relief of peace is fulfilling. Oh, interesting. Let's see. Okay. Hold on. There are a lot of comments here. And they came in very quickly. Okay. After betrayal of a family member, how do you move forward? That's an interesting question. Betrayal is something that's very hard for people to understand and process. It doesn't actually go into we don't have a pathway for that. And so it takes a lot of time, healing, and often therapy to recover from that. Destiny, my good space has been separated, and that was my husband. And my son also, he's struggling. You're having a hard time. I'm sorry to hear that, Destiny. Pamela, amen to not oversharing. I've done that most of my life. And by the way, I do have adult ADHD. Destiny, but when I push myself for him, I feel like screaming. I can't hear any noise without triggering. I'll say awkward things. Yeah, I hear that. Lorraine, I no longer do this, but I put myself out there to be accepted no matter what. And then they would ignore me or be mean. Putting myself out there feeling you were not good enough, so I would allow that to affect my self-esteem. I'm so glad you don't do that anymore, Lorraine. Tanya, I feel like oversharing is also an issue that I struggle with, in the sense that my ex-daughter-in-law informed me that when I'm at a family event or family gathering, I have to be the center of attention. But I feel like when she said she was very, very hurt, and the only one who has said that about your behavior. So she might be angry with you about something and is talking about that instead. Testing, I overshare so much when I'm nervous, and I've been working on it. Everybody overshares when they're nervous, whether you have ADHD or not. People overshare or they pull in. You have one response or the other. So we just have to really kind of monitor that. Feeling stupid, not intelligent, ADD interfere with my processing. Right, so you just need a little more time and space to when you're in social situations, and you can buy that time and space by saying things like, that's a really interesting question. Let me think about it and get back to you. Or, I appreciate your comment. I'm not sure how I want to respond. I need a couple minutes. So you buy yourself time, ask for it. And thank you for these suggestions about groups for kids and NAMI. I appreciate that. Yes, you can always watch this on the replay. Yes, you've got to get outside, Destiny. My son is shy and you can hear my dog in the background, I'm sorry, being bullied. How can I help him open up to meet new friends? He only hangs out with 5 kids 5 years younger. So I think that if your child was bullied and has a history of that kind of trauma, it probably would make sense to get some therapy, because that trauma is holding him back from moving forward and making new relationships. It's not that you don't have control anymore. It's just that you've had a setback. So, if you've had a setback, that's okay. What needs to happen to move yourself forward a little bit? Anesha, you've been working on it for years, but can't completely get it. It should be simple. It's not simple. Making friends and having relationships is complex. So don't tell yourself that it's simple, because it's not. And give yourself permission to struggle a bit. was important for me to walk away when I was talking more about them in therapy instead of the issues. It took me practice to walk away from toxic behavior. Good for you. The 4 items of friendship, please. I think, did you mean the different layers, Monica? So I'll say intimates, best buddies, pals, acquaintances, and strangers. And the 4 other things were resilience, proximity, seeing people in a range of settings, and building up information about somebody, and then having similar interests and sharing similar activities. So we are over time. This has been a great session. Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm going to put in the link to my gift, my downloadable, which is about social anxiety. I really encourage you to check this out. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that all of you have a lovely weekend. Bye.